Welcome to the Online Business Launchpad podcast. Today, I have Patti DiNucci with me. I was listening to Ed Gandia's podcast. It's the High Income Business Writing podcast. And I heard Patti speaking on his podcast, and something she said just piqued my interest. I suddenly sat up and started listening even more intently than I already was, because I listen to lots of podcasts and I usually do it while I'm walking. So I am listening quite closely. But she was talking about something that's always been something that I really enjoy, but it's something that I've learned that you can do either really badly or really well. And she was talking about doing networking better instead of networking more. And as an entrepreneur, we always hearing these, people saying that you should get out there and network, you should get out there, that's how you get clients. And if you want more clients, you have to network. And it's just, for some people like me, I can tolerate so much, and then it's, oh wow, maybe I need to just go and be quiet for a little while. And so what she was saying made me go, oh, I'd love to have Patti on this podcast. And she very graciously said yes when I reached out. And I'll just tell you a little bit more. She's a speaker, she's a workshop facilitator, a consultant, and an author. She's written a couple of books, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. But she's got one that as soon as I saw the name of it, I went, oh, I'm going to buy that book. And it's called The Intentional Networker, Attracting Powerful Relationships, Referrals, and Results in Business. And I'm thinking that's perfectly timed. It's just perfectly spot on. And I actually did. I went and picked up a copy. For those of you who are listening, you won't be able to see this, but I'm holding up the book called The Intentional Networker. And it's got my lovely little scrap of paper as my marker. And I've just been working my way through it, taking mental notes and actually applying some of the techniques that are in there already, which I'll talk about in another podcast episode. But it's actually a really well-written book. It's something that's really valuable for me in terms of just that whole concept of coming back to that concept of doing it better instead of doing more. So, Patti, thank you so much for saying that you would be on the podcast today.
Oh my, what a lovely invitation. I love doing podcasts because it's talking, it's having a conversation.
Did you ever think that when you were younger, you'd be able to make part of your living out of talking to other people on podcasts?
I did get a C in conduct once in the 4th grade for talking too much. When I was in the 1st grade, I wanted to be an art teacher. And I have resurrected some of my art work and art hobbies. I guess I've always just enjoyed socializing with other like-minded people that don't do things the way I do it. And then I just like sharing good information and teaching people how to do things better, because I know it can make us more confident and help us stop wasting our time, and it's enlightening. I didn't have it planned that I would have a couple of books written by the time I'm the age I am now.
Isn't it funny? The seeds of what we become, often they're hidden. We don't really realize until we're much, much older. So Can you just talk a little bit about your journey from the time that you were in 1st grade and getting a C in conduct, all the way through to when you decided you wanted to focus on being an entrepreneur, running your own business, and the book side of things? Just take us along that journey a little bit.
Sure, and I'll try not to make it too long and boring. I grew up in a small mining town in northern Minnesota, very cold, very wintry most of the year. My friends and I all had what we call feral childhoods, where mom kicked us out of the house at a certain time, like 9 in the morning on a Saturday. And we weren't supposed to come back until we saw dad's car come down the driveway for lunch. And we just very creative. We played lots of fun games. We made games up. We put on shows. We did all that. So we were very creative, we had our own little culture, which I thought was really amazing. Graduated from high school, went to college. I actually have a degree in clothing, textiles, and design. But that included modules on journalism, with a lot of writing, marketing, business, art. I minored in art, design. So all the elements of everything I loved to do was in that major. And I would do it all again, even though it doesn't seem pertinent to what I do now. I learned so many good things while I was at college. And then I moved to Texas. I was bound and determined to get out of the North. And all the action was in Texas back in the 1980s, long time ago. And so I came to Austin and loved the lakes and the hills. And Austin's just a different town from the rest of Texas. And started working in the marketing, advertising, and PR industry. Learned from some really great mentors, worked with all kinds of high-tech companies. I wrote about the earliest versions of touchscreens. I wrote about what they now call 3D printing, It was really fun. And then I started my own marketing communications practice in 1989. I've been on my own a long time. What started the writing of the book and the networking and connecting was I had no problem attracting clients. I would go out and network. I would meet people. I would do good work. They'd invite me back. I'd get referred, all of that. And I had so many people asking me, why don't you come speak to our group on how you do that? Why don't you have coffee with me? I'd really like to learn more from you, how you do this. And it dawned on me right about the time my son was in, I guess he was almost finishing high school and I needed an empty nest project. I wrote The Intentional Networker, which came out in 2011. It's been out for 12 years and it's still selling. I'm still getting checks from Amazon. It's great.
It's a good book.
Thank you. And I realized that I skipped this part. My grandfather and my dad were the local Chevrolet dealers in our little town. And Dad and my grandfather were really gregarious and outgoing, and they literally built the business one conversation at a time. And then my mother was a little more introverted, more gracious, more selective. And I'm this combination of the two of them. I grew up in an environment that was very socially intelligent. Let's put it that way. That was part of the deal too. So with the help of a really wonderful coach, I wrote The Intentional Net. It not only won one award, it swept the entire nonfiction category of the Indie Reader Discovery Awards. I almost fell off my chair when I got that news, but I worked really hard on it. I want it to be a good book. I want it to be timeless, which I think it is. And then after that, I started speaking all over the country. I spoke at Microsoft and Rodan and Fields. I just did a workshop for Cabby, which is a clothing company, high-tech clothing associations. It seems like it's just a really timeless subject.
I think it is. And it's also not limited to any one particular industry, because when I was working as an employee in senior management, chief information officer type roles, this kind of book would have been invaluable if I'd known it existed, because you're always talking to people. You're always going, like I would go to conferences and you would look around you and go, wow, there's so many people here that have so much experience. I'd love to talk to them all, can't talk to them all. How do you go about getting the most value out of it for yourself, the business that you're working for, the organization that you're working for? So anybody who's on a career path benefits from being able to do this better. And if you're a small business owner going out there looking for customers and clients, you're going to benefit from it as well. So I think it's really powerful.
And you'll notice in the book, I had somebody call me once and say, Patty, I'm on like chapter 3 and you haven't even gotten to the networking part. When do I get to the networking part? And that was very much on purpose. I really wanted people to, and I'm looking, it's been a while since I wrote this and it's time for me to reread it. But I know I started out with helping readers figure out, who are you? Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Are you an ambivert, which is what I am? I'm exactly half introvert and extrovert. And by the way, people who are introverts think it's the same as being shy, and that's not. Introvert is just how your battery is charged. Being shy means you're socially uncomfortable, and that can be fixed, changed, and it's strengthened. In fact, your social intelligence can always be strengthened. It's just a matter of, do you want to strengthen it? And we put in the work to do that. But I think getting very self-aware and very clear on what's your purpose on different levels, I think that helps when people go to a conference. You're spending so much time, money, and energy going to conferences. And how do you know who to go talk to? And how do you maybe make a little conversation with somebody a little shorter than it needs to be so that you don't waste your time? That's a big one too.
That's a big one. And we tend not to think about that one so much, but we've all been trapped in conversations that we go, whoa.
It just happened to me today. And I did not dislike the conversation. I was at a networking luncheon and I ran into a friend and we just ended up chatting and catching up. And there really wasn't a great moment, even for me, the person who should know better, how to extract myself and talk to some of the other people that I didn't know. I fell into that trap just today. It just happens.
It does. I want to come back a little bit to what you said, because one of the questions that I'm always fascinated by, and that's coming back to the whole introvert, extrovert, shy, not shy, almost personality-based approach to how you go about networking. I've always wondered about that because I sometimes think that there must be another dimension, I'll call it a personality dimension, that's more around how comfortable we are in new situations,
Mhm.
and how easy it is for us to make up plans on the fly or spot opportunities on the fly and then take advantage of those opportunities and do something with them. What are your thoughts on that in terms of maybe
Ooh.
there's more to it than
Well,
just those two,
yeah.
introvert versus shy?
I think some of us are, again, I had the benefit of watching my parents in action from a very young age. My dad would get up from the dinner table and say, I'm going to go run next door and see how everybody's doing to our neighbors. It's like, he would just do that. He just wanted to know what was going on around him. So I learned to be fearful. And he talked to strangers all the time too, which I now do too. I talk to everybody. And it's really fun for me. It's like a quest almost. But I think, again, it's something that you might have a natural affinity for, which again, I probably have some DNA from my parents. And then you learn also by role models. And then you learn by practice. And I can tell you, I'm a far better conversationalist who's far more comfortable in more situations now than I was back in my 20s. I have way more confidence. I've been researching and writing about this for how many years now? And I'm better at it. I still have moments where I walk into a room full of people and the energy is just buzzing. And where do you start? And where you start is just look for the group of people that looks the friendliest and up to them, introduce yourself. I know people tend to put themselves in a box and say, I'm an introvert, so therefore I'm not going to work on this. And it's like, come on, don't give up. Being socially comfortable and intelligent is probably one of the key things. There's a study out of Harvard that says they've been following people for years, like decades. The study's been going on for 85 years. And they determined that the secret to a happy, healthy, successful life is socializing and relationships. There it is.
That is an interesting thing in this day and age where, especially after COVID, a lot of us doing all of our socializing from our screens, and that whole transition afterwards of starting to get back out there, starting to go to live events, and just basically trying to get the feeling back, the sense back that it's okay to be out there talking to everybody and just getting back into the networking side of things. I've got a couple of questions that, let me see if I can do it in a way that's not going to make me ask you one and then forget to ask you the other one. So first of all, however you found it after COVID, have people's approach to networking changed? Has your understanding of how we should be networking changed after we've had all of these lockdowns and things?
I will start by saying that we were already going down the path of being less social before the pandemic. Everyone blames things on the pandemic, but we were already becoming more isolated. I learned that Austin, which is actually a really fun, vibrant town, is one of the top 20 loneliest cities in the United States. And it's because people are eating alone, they're living alone. They're playing video games, watching Netflix at night. Their lives are more isolated and solo. So that's interesting. So how has it changed since the pandemic? I think the first year of the pandemic was the worst. And then people gradually start to feel more comfortable, but they weren't completely comfortable. So I went to a couple of events and people were a little, oh, don't breathe on me. And then it got better, but I'm seeing a huge difference, particularly this year, when I'm going back to networking events, when I'm speaking. People are almost giddy. They're dressing nicer. There is a little bit of a celebration and I think people are realizing how much we missed it, how much we missed being with people, like physically with people.
Yeah.
Right now, we're only seeing each other in 2 dimensions. It just feels different.
It really does feel different. Sorry. Pardon me. Yes, I went to a gift fair just this week. It's the first big sort of conference sort of a thing that I've been to for a while. And just the buzz and the energy and the chance to be able to walk up and talk to people and strike up a conversation, it's just so much nicer. And it's just a bit of a game changer, really. But I want to come back to the second question that I had. And you mentioned the research that you've done over the years. Can you just talk a little bit about your approach to research, especially as it relates to your subject matter expertise?
Some of it is just everyday experience, everyday conversations. About, 8+ years ago, I started researching my second book, which is more than just talk. It's a book about conversations. It's the prequel, I think, to The Intentional Networker. I would actually talk to people, just random people, as well as my family, friends, colleagues, experts. I read a lot of books. I have two of them propped underneath my computer. One of them is called The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker, and the other is called Friendship by Lydia Denworth. So I did a lot of reading. I did go on the internet. I found a lot of interesting studies on the internet. And I'm not going to say I'm not an obsessive person, but I got so fascinated with this because there are so many compelling reasons why we humans, no matter what you label yourself as, socially awkward, social anxiety, need people. We are social creatures. And an interesting historic fact is when man discovered fire, there's some debate how long ago that was, but it was a long time ago. Suddenly, humans could stay up at night and talk about things besides, oh my gosh, there's that bear. Oh my gosh, don't pick those berries, they're poisonous. It had a little bit of social time because we discovered fire. And that's how culture started. And so it goes way back to human development. And we're drifting in the other direction. And it makes me really sad.
It's going to be interesting. We could talk about this for quite a long time, but it'll be interesting to see how all of the weather events and things that are happening and whether or not we sort of society ends up drifting back the other way again, because we're going to need to support each other to actually make it through everything that's going on. I'm curious a little bit about your book writing. So you obviously wrote a book back in 2011. It came out in 2011 and it stood the test of time. It's still out there. People are still buying it. People are still finding it useful. And out of all of the people that I've talked to, lots of people have written a book. They've written one book. Not that many people have written two books or more books. So talk just a little bit about the reasons why you decided to jump back in and write this second book. You said it's partly research-based. Talk a little bit about that part of your journey.
I do love writing and I do love learning. And so the research was really fun. And when I was out speaking and just in other conversations with whoever at parties or whatever, people would say, your intentional networker book is great, but what I want to know is, how do you start the conversation? How do you manage a conversation? What do you do when the conversation got down to the actual nuts and bolts of the conversation? So I just felt compelled. We did a good job the first time around. We're going to do it again. And like I said, I spent 8 years on this, partially because I would write and then I'd have to be on the road speaking, and that would get just, and I was actually going to take 2020 off to finish this book. And then I'm not going to say I started the pandemic. I wished it into existence, but it was awfully convenient. And then I also hired a really good friend of mine as my editor, and her brain understands my brain and I understand hers. And I could be busy just writing and doing the research, and she could help me put the pieces together. And so that became a really great partnership. I put her name's Susan Pretty on the front of the book. There was no way I was not going to have her name on the cover. And we still have a blast together doing all kinds of editing projects and things. So, I mean, it was just, I got more questions that needed answering.
That's really interesting, because that whole collaboration side of things for doing projects, a valuable thing to have. I'm just saying it up front. I love doing collaborations. I do collaborations with other people as well. And it's just like night and day. If you're trying to do it by yourself, it takes forever. You just struggle with the hard bits. But if you're working with somebody else, their energy picks you up when you don't have the energy, and your energy picks them up. And so talk in terms of collaborations, maybe just share a little bit about that particular side of things. Any advice for people listening who might be interested in maybe trying collaboration for the first time with somebody they've been thinking about it and going, oh, I'm not sure, but what would you say?
It was not easy. The first book I did, The Intentional Networker, I had one person I worked with, and then I had an editor who came in and saw the places where I was repeating myself and things could be tightened and all that. This time around, I hired and fired at least I hired a coach who just wasn't tough enough on me, because I'm very creative. I just want to start writing about, how I feel about this topic. The second one was a little too lovely person. I loved my meetings with her, but her critiques of how a chapter was going was like having an English professor in college just tear apart something you worked really hard on. So that was a little bit soul sucking, and it wasn't anything personal. It's just her style. So then when I hired Susan, she just kept writing, just keep sending it to me. And then she would give me what she thought was going to be a good working outline. And I need some more pieces on this. Great, I got it. And again, she could be in the smart chair, smooth over some of the writing, add some clarity. She would say, be funnier. Come on, you got to be funnier in this part. So she was my coach. She was my therapist. She was my cheerleader. She said, Patti, this is a great book. Even when I felt like, oh, this is exhausting. So I really felt like we got traction when we started working together. And it wasn't cheap. I had to pay her, obviously, worth every penny. The book would not have been finished without her. It was just the kind of book that I wanted to be pretty thorough. And it's about an inch thick, but it's not dense. I kept the font style big and lots of room for writing and reflecting.
It makes it easier to read when there's lots of good white space.
People who are really organized say, what was your process? Because I just wrote, just kept reading and I kept writing. I need to help you clean it up.
Yeah, that's the thing, the key thing, isn't it? The more you sit down and write, the more likely you are to finish your book. So I'm just going to quickly come back to something that you just said. You said the first person you worked with just wasn't tough enough on you. I'm curious in terms of how did you as a person come to the realization that you needed somebody to be even tougher on you than that person was being? What was that like internally in terms of the thought process?
I think I just felt like I wasn't making progress. Like the light bulb was not on. I knew how I was feeling already, which is why I hired this person. And we had a couple of meetings. I just didn't feel like we were making progress. I don't think this person was giving me anything I couldn't give myself. It just wasn't a fit. And then the second person, lovely, very experienced, a little more academic, I think, in style. And the feedback process was just like, oh, I have to go back and redo this whole, I felt exhausted. I needed to be energized. It was really important to feel energized because when you're in, as probably when you're really in the woods with something, it's easy to just go, oh, no one's going to care about this. This is, and Susan was like, Patti, you got to finish this book. It's so important. She just, the wind beneath my wings for sure. I feel so blessed that I had her in my court.
I think that's lovely because I was thinking of it in terms of coaching and just making sure that the fit's right.
Just to give you the background on our friendship, we were both marketing communications writers and we met before our kids were born, which is more than 30 years ago. And we filled in for each other during times of too much work, pregnancy, or that kind of thing. And so she knows how I write. I know how she writes. And our brains clicked, but we had complementary roles. I knew my role, she knew hers. I think that's chemistry, similarities, something in common, and then knowing your role.
I like that whole, we used to call it staying in your lane. When you've got a team of people, you need people to just do their job and not yours and theirs as well, because that doesn't work at all. I want to come back a little bit to the other work that you do. So basically you go out there, you're speaking, you're a workshop facilitator and consultant. You want to just talk about the consultancy part of your business and how you help? I assume that you work with organizations.
I've worked with a few organizations. I've worked with some individuals too who came to me for more coaching because I do coaching too. Consulting, I can give you an example. It's often engineering companies that hire me because engineers are in their heads a lot. They're very smart and they struggle a little bit with socializing. And I gave a workshop to a group of engineers out in California, gave them a group workshop where I went through some of the processes and some of the mindset shifts. The big mindset shift is assume positive rapport. In other words, when you go up to someone, assume they're going to like you. And when you go into a conversation with that attitude, your body language is different. You're more relaxed, you're more happy, and that nervous, awkward thing goes away. It's hard to do. It takes practice. Having a nice list of questions in your back pocket to get things rolling, then listening for cues on what else you need to ask. And it depends. Are you in a sales situation? Are you at a trade show? What is it? Are you with a client? Listening is huge. I think when people discover that listening is more than you talk, that kind of helps out a little bit too. But yes, I have just worked with companies, and then I often have a coaching segment where people can sign up for a little bit of individual work with me, or they can ask questions that they might not want to ask in front of a group.
That's always just a little bit awkward when you know you need to ask a particular question, but if you ask it, so-and-so sitting across the table from you could potentially use it as ammunition, which can be really awkward, but so important. So what I'd like to do now is just give you just a little bit of a scenario. And if you could just talk the listeners through what you would do in a situation like that. So I could pick one or the other, but I'm just going to stick with somebody who's going to a conference where they don't really know anybody. They could either be somebody who's an employee or somebody who's a manager and they're there because they're meant to be networking, or you could be a business owner and you're there looking for clients, not necessarily looking for clients, but you were there because you have a small business and you would be looking for clients in some way. And let's just assume that they're not quite sure how to go about it. Maybe it's the first time they've been to a big conference. They've been to small things, but it's a big conference. And they need to make sure that the time that they spend there counts. What would you do? Just walk us step by step through what you would do in that situation like that.
I still do this when I go speak at a conference. For example, last year I spoke at the Texas Society of Association Executives, which means all the association decision makers are there. And I did some sessions. So I'm not only speaking, I'm also hoping, fingers crossed, that I'll get hired by some of these associations. Okay. Oh, and it's not easy. I will tell you, it's not easy. And if you can go with somebody that you know, not to cling to them the entire time, but to have them as a life raft. Let's divide and conquer. And then if you just get really less anxious or desperate or lonely, come find me and we'll hang out together for a little while. So sometimes having a buddy is a good thing. I do recommend that. I would spend a little time before going to the conference to literally get a notebook and write down, why do you want to go? Are you going to learn? Because conferences are about learning. Are you wanting to practice your social skills? Are you wanting to meet potential clients? Are you wanting to meet people who can refer you? List every reason, even if it's just to get out of the house and away from the kids for 3 days. List all of it. And then write down what your vision is. And by that, what would success look like? Imagine that it's over and it was a rousing success. What would that look, sound, feel like? And you can get crazy with that and go, I have 10 new clients. I had the time of my life. I met my new best friend. I learned something that is changing my business. When you know what success looks like, it's funny, like you could, and then one more thing you do is write down your intentions. What are you going to do? What's your part? I intend to walk up to at least 5 people at this event, like the VIP cocktail party. I intend to get my sleep. I intend to not drink too much. I not drink too much alcohol, not drink too much coffee. I intend to take care of myself. List it all. And then honestly, you could rip that paper up and throw it in the trash, but it's in your head. You've written it, especially by hand. If you've written it, it's running through your brain several times and you're programmed now. And it's astonishing to me what that does. It's just night and day. You'll suddenly run into like the perfect people for you. You'll have a great time. You'll know when you're tired, it's time for me to go to bed. I know that in the morning I should go to the gym and exercise, which by the way, going to the gym in the morning, getting up early is where all the really important people are. That's one of my tricks. That's how I would do it. I would spend some time up front and then relax and let it go.
I think that's really good advice. I love the tip about going to the gym because it's true. Because people who are busy up early, they're going to the gym so that they've got time to do what they need to do during the.
Some people say, "Oh, stay up late and go to the bar. That's where all the deals are made." No, it's at the gym. Or if they have a morning walk where it's an organized part of the thing, go on that.
Those are perfect for being able to get to know people in a way that's just so comfortable. It's very relaxing. That's a great idea. I do have one more question before we start to wrap up. Pardon me. And this is something that I've been wondering about recently. And when I was reading your book, I went, I think I need to think about this again. And that is the role that business cards, physical, paper-based business cards, play in today's society and in this whole concept of networking better. What's your opinion about business cards?
Wow. Okay. Here I am. I'm at the age that I'm at. I am not what they call a data native, meaning that I've had an analog life prior to the digital life. and I tend to be tactile and visual. And so I do still think, and this with all sincerity, that having a business card is still like a party favor. And I'm not saying you go out and deal them out when you're playing cards with somebody. Be selective on who you give them to, be selective on whose business card you take. And just today at the very luncheon that I was at, the gentleman sitting next to me had this plastic card with the QR code on it that he hands you, and then it connects you to him. To me, that's not the same. I like to bring my cards home, write on them, like the date, the event, what we talked about, something that gives me a little memoir of who this person is. And I have cards I've collected, oh gosh, for decades. And I go through them. And if I can't really remember who this person was, and I don't even have any recollection, I toss the card. But I think when our contact information gets lost in the ocean of information, it's hard for me to remember. So I'm still all about the business cards, and they're not that expensive. Make art projects out of them. They don't have to go to waste. Recycle them if you don't want to keep them.
I think it's interesting to hear people's opinions, because I have been in situations where I've been at events and I'll walk up and somebody will ask for my card. This will be younger people. I'll hand them my card. They'll pull out their phone, take a picture, and give me the card back. And
I think that's how I'm all about change. Doing something a different way is better. Let's do it. If doing something different is just the new way, but it doesn't work for you, then don't do that. I still have cards. And I don't hand them out to everybody. I handed out one card today. I don't deal them out to everybody. I just don't know how to find me. I'm at the stage now where people can find me. They can Google me.
It's something that I've been thinking about, because I do have cards. I haven't updated them in a long time. And I tend not to hand them out because of that experience of handing it out and getting it handed back. And I'm thinking, oh, they're obsolete. So I went to this event this week, didn't have any cards with me. And of course, 3 or 4 people asked me for a card. Oops, that was a mistake.
Oops. I run out and I forget to replenish.
But I think just coming back to some of the advice that's in your book, The Intentional Networker, I love what you have to say about understand who you are, what it is that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And basically just being a little bit more deliberate about what we do, a little bit more intentional, because I don't know, sometimes for me, I enjoy spontaneity, living off the seat of my pants, but it's not always the wisest way of doing and being. But it's been really great talking to you and listening to you talk about your journey and what you've done. If people were more interested in finding out, or if people were interested in finding out more about you, where would they go? And if they're interested in your books, where would they go?
If they're interested in finding out more about me, my website is intentionalnetworker.com. And if you go to that site, you're going to get a pop-up. I normally am not a pop-up fan, but by God, this time I wanted to have one. So I'm going to suggest that even if you don't want to stay on my blog post subscription list, at least sign up so that you have access to several free resource chapters out of both books. This is going to sound boring, but the appendix out of my new book is a list of conversation starting questions organized by setting and situation.
That would be useful.
It could have been like 5 times longer. Again, Susan said, enough of the appendix. So that's a great resource. People are loving that resource. And then there's an intention setting sheet that you can get. So do that. And you can read about me, a little more about my clients, a little more about my work. My books are pretty much available from any online retailer, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I don't know what international ones you have, but you should be able to find it. And they are companions. I'm going to say, if you're going to get one, get the other 2, because they work together, and they are loaded with attitudes. Like you said, you fly by the seat of your pants. I call that being a possibilitarian. It's okay to have purpose and then be open to, hey, maybe the universe is going to give me something that I'm not even expecting, and I'm going to pay attention to that. Have you ever had something amazing just land in your lap? It's partly because you were more purposeful and you were paying attention.
The more prepared you are, the better you do usually.
Absolutely.
So it's just, I'll make sure I put those links in the show notes so that people can go to your website and find out more about your books. Patti, it's been lovely speaking with you. Thank you once again for being on the podcast.
Oh, absolutely, Trudy. It was my pleasure.